So there's other topics of the education arena. One is early childhood education. So we'll go through these different topics. And again, the idea is then for you to say, well, I'm really interested in pensions. I'm really interested in early childhood education, and find your focus and your line of engagement. So early childhood education. Research is clear that a high quality early childhood education is critical for students' success. While a highly personal decision and a space filled with a variety of providers, from daycare to school-based programs to friends and family care, there is general consensus about what constitutes a quality program, regardless of its setting. Early childhood education is also increasingly being seen as a workforce issue, both for working parents and for addressing learning gaps early, with interest growing from a variety of sectors, including from the business community. Quality early childhood education is costly, and there is a debate as to whether funding should be public, private, or a combination. Studies show that Head Start, the primary federal investment in early childhood, and other high-quality publicly funded pre-K programs have a large effect on students when they are in the program, but that those benefits dissipate over time. However, many believe that dissipation of the benefits is due to students going from a high-quality personalized program to a low-performing elementary school that doesn't continue to push them. This phenomenon underscores the need to rethink the education system so all students have access to a quality education regardless of zip code. Early childhood education is an issue, like when kids start school with a basic understanding of simple concepts such as a number line or the alphabets or greater big. It is an issue, and I think that's what also impacts the long-term performance of students in each of the school districts.
And there, I think, is also a really broad number of perspectives as to what early childhood education should be. I mean, I think some people think it should be very play-based. Some people think it should be more Montessori-based. I remember running into a woman at our local beach one summer, and her child was about the same age as mine, 4 at the time. And I said, so where does your daughter go to preschool? And she looked at me, she goes, she doesn't need to go to school until she's in kindergarten. I think culturally that was just, or perhaps it was just her family, but I don't think that means the child wasn't learning anything. I just think that people have very different views on what's appropriate for a child. Obviously, having them engaged in learning some basic concepts so that they can be prepared for kindergarten is important. And it makes, if there were to be a national early childhood education program, whose form would win? I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's right. There's very different approaches. Yeah, right. Some are very didactic. Some are very play-based. Mm-hmm. And again, I think, if you look in Germany or you look in other systems, some are very play-based, and you're learning about just working with other people, socializing,
social skills,
discovering your world, and becoming a lifelong learner as well. So it's a really good point that there's very different views, and you only know these views when you become a parent.
That's true. Or an aunt
and you're interacting with kids. Because when it comes to early education, it's interesting from my own experience. I always thought I was very structured and wanted a very rigorous program. And then I had my own children and ended up being one of those people preferring a play-based approach, and was really anti, drills and worksheets. And I was really against it, which totally surprised me. I would not have expected that of myself. So
that's the beauty of having children.
That's right.
You learn an awful lot about yourself. I just wanted to hit one other part of this, and I thought it was fascinating, the notion that early childhood education can have a huge impact, but I suppose it's kind of heartbreaking that we're not sure that if because kids don't have good schools that keep them on a path, that's why they lose whatever skills and knowledge that they had earlier. And so, I mean, there could probably be a brief just on that one paragraph there alone.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, we do have circles in Indiana who really focused on education. So this is another thing that you could pick on one topic and decide to go really deep. And they actually made recommendations to the state of Indiana on early education.
That's great.
So, so the next section is rural education, Beth.
Okay, so with rural education, inner cities are not the only places struggling to create quality options for education. Rural areas present a challenge in terms of quality options that can be scaled given low populations of students and difficulty recruiting teachers. Charter networks that some look to for positive competition that increases the value of all educational institutions are not likely to scale efficiently in a rural setting. Online education could be a cost-effective means to fill gaps in the teaching ranks and offer more course choice and access. You can refer to Jeb Bush's Foundation for Excellent Education resource, which you can click through to in the brief. But the quality of online schools varies greatly, and reliable high-speed internet access is a technological challenge in many rural areas.
So career and technical education is also, and we do have a brief that is really focused on the higher education. So this is just really a touch on. In the past, career and technical education, CTE is the acronym, was dismissed as vocational education for those who couldn't do college prep level work and often included a disproportionate numbers of low-income students of color and students with disabilities. However, given the needs of the current economy, the career and technical education community is increasingly viewed as much more than just auto mechanics and other vocational classes. Programs such as P-Tech, started in New York, and a partnership with IBM and other programs incorporate dual enrollment opportunities with the local community college or apprenticeships. With career and technical education, business engagement is critical to ensuring that students are actually getting skills that are lead to employment, especially in the local job market. And this is where somehow it's completely taken out of high school, where it used to be, and in a lot of countries that we look up to, such as Germany, it's very much part of the K-12 education program, where early on a technical track is offered as an option. And not to say that later on you can access to college, you could go to college, but with people having different developmental path to education.
And even just interests. Some people don't want higher education. They don't want a philosophy degree. They actually want to learn how engines work and how to take them apart and put them together. And we have such a need for this in the economy that it is good to see. It seems like there was a swing, I don't know how long ago, 10, 20 years ago, saying that everyone needs a college education. And it's not that that's a bad, lofty goal, but I think it's if that person wants one. And the truth is that we have so many unmet needs, and then also just instances where you can make a great living doing a lot of the professions that you can get, or the jobs that you can get from having a technical education. And so it's good to see that this does seem to be making some headway. And if I can encourage people to definitely check out the brief called Creating Career Pathways, it's really good. And it was actually the topic of our summit a couple of years ago.
That's right.
And it was excellent. There are so many good examples of some really innovative programs.
One of the issues here with career and technical education is really removing the stigma that you are not good enough for college. Like, we need to remove that language that there's this hierarchy in skill set and put them in a way at the same level, because there are no non-essential jobs, and there's just a path for everyone, and it needs to be valued the same way. And that is a stigma. I think that this is where, the public, our governments, we need to change it, or even businesses. And I know businesses organize career fairs so that parents embrace this idea that their kid who could earn a very good living pursuing a technical career and a vocational track. And that needs to be a family engagement. I keep adding this. All right, programs to reduce summer loss. So another issue particularly affecting low-income communities is summer loss. That is, students who essentially forget material they learned over the summer and thus start the year behind where they should be. Brookings reviewed studies and found one that students' achievement scores declined over summer vacation by 1 month worth of school year learning, and Black and Latino families tended to learn less during the year and lose more over the summer, therefore widening the gap. Also in the article, Brookings identifies several programs can help with summer loss, including home-based reading programs such as Reads for Summer Learning and sending simple text messages that provide ideas, direction, and encouragement for parents and students. So with these issues and topic at hand, the next step is, what is the role of government and what are some ideas of reform?
Well, and just backing up just for one point about this section, we here in the United States, our school system and calendar is still based on basically an agricultural calendar. And so you could get rid of summer loss if maybe we rethought the number of months that we go to school. Is there a better way to do this? It's always been interesting to me that hasn't been a real push, and perhaps it's
that's radical.
People.
I mean, that's
should
radical.
Maybe get like the current schools
I don't think
better.
that would ever fly. So it's like,
But we are. I'm not sure. This would be interesting. How many other countries do their calendar like we do? I know in Asia, when I lived in Japan, no, they go year round. They have a much different way of doing that. And then if they're not in school, they're in extra school. So it is different. But
it is different.
Yeah, you're right. That would be a tall order.
It would be a tall order to give up summer vacation. I don't know where you start there.
All right. So what is the role of government and some ideas for reform? So state and local governments play the predominant role in setting education policy, but the federal government has historically exercised significant influence by tying federal funds to the achievement of federal guidelines. So at the federal level, free market proponents generally do not believe that our education system can be fixed from Washington, for example, with Common Core standards, but rather prefer that the federal government support and enable reform that allows state and local policymakers, educators, and administrators to create better learning environments for students. The Every Student Succeeds Act, the latest version of No Child Left Behind, requires states to report per pupil spending to enable various return on investment metrics and to remind K-12 administrators that they have an obligation to use taxpayer dollars wisely. For more, you can read Frederick Hess's argument for these reforms that increase transparency, and there is a click-through in the brief.
So state and local governments are overseen by elected and appointed school boards, have long had primary responsibility for public K-12 education. In general terms, children are assigned to public schools based on geography. Schools within a town or a county belong to a public school district. Each district obtains funding from the state, largely financed by income and sales taxation, and sometimes even lotteries. In addition, as a government unit, a district itself may have the authority to levy taxes as part of the local property tax system. Some support this geographic assignment and combined state and local funding and advocate for additional resources, higher teacher pay, smaller class sizes as the pathway to improve education. Theoretically, it makes sense to keep school funding sources as close to the consumers of those services as possible for transparency and accountability, but provide alternatives for those areas whose property tax base cannot generate enough needed revenue. States are in the position to legislate reforms that can empower parents to make the best fit decision when it comes to education for their children. Ideas for reform can be found in the following section.
So do you want to talk a little bit about funding? And I think it belongs. I mean, the whole notion that states and local governments should be in charge of the funding for schools, to me, makes a lot of sense. I do think, as we referred to earlier, the 14th Amendment says that education is interpreted to say that education's a state and local issue. But the whole unevenness of it, it's an issue. I'm not sure what the magic solution is, but it is something that, here's one thing you should definitely be doing is going to your school board meetings and understanding and looking up the budgets and really understanding what your taxes what those go to pay for and how they're being spent, because that's what the school board is for. They're supposed to be overseeing the good spending of the money that is being gathered by residents who believe in a public school system. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they're paying for it. And, it's just interesting that you actually can learn a lot by becoming more familiar with it. And in some cases, it can be pretty eye-opening, but that's really the first step. And the notion that this is a state and local issue kind of necessitates that then you need state and local people to participate. And so
that's right. As well as businesses, because if we always go back to the original goal of education is to be equipped to live a good life in the 21st century. And I feel like that's where, businesses, this partnership with local businesses involved in the local school system so that we develop people who can then work and find career pathways in their community. And that's something that's not heard about very often. And that could be a really good, even community discussion forum on this topic.
That's a great point. No, you're right. That is not discussed or thought of very often. And so that is important. So one other element in terms of the role of government is actually community-based organizations. And so those are public and private organizations that address the needs of a specific geographic area, and they can play a role in improving educational outcomes. So kind of sounding like maybe an association of groups. And they often offer mentoring programs and other supportive programs to increase success rates in school. So according to a white paper by the Institute for Higher Education Policy, which you can click through to on the brief, in 2009, the American Youth Policy Forum found that students who participated in community-based programs were more likely to be engaged in school, take advanced courses, apply for financial aid, enroll in college, and earn post-secondary degrees and employment. So certainly an area to look into and to find out what's happening in your neighborhood or perhaps in neighborhoods which need a little bit more hands-on in terms of keeping kids at school and helping them succeed. Not to mention, my guess is that there are opportunities where you can serve as a mentor and help in that way.